The forest had always been a place of quiet wonder, where towering pines whispered secrets to the wind and the rivers sang ancient songs. But on this particular evening, the stillness was broken by an unusual sight, one that no one in the nearby village would have believed had they not seen it with their own eyes. A boy, no older than 10, walked carefully down the winding dirt path that led from the depths of the wilderness. His steps were slow and deliberate, as if guided by something beyond his own understanding. And beside him, just inches away, padded a massive mother bear. Her thick fur was matted with dirt, her breaths heavy with exhaustion. Yet, despite her formidable size and strength, she showed no signs of aggression. Instead, her deep, dark eyes held something unexpected, pleading, trust, and a silent request for help. For the villagers who first glimpsed this astonishing duo, fear was their natural instinct. A bear this size, this close, could mean danger. But then they saw the boy, his small hand resting gently on the bear's side, his expression neither fearful nor alarmed. It was as if an unspoken bond had formed between them, something beyond the comprehension of those who stood watching. The bear, a creature so often associated with power and survival, now appeared vulnerable. A deep wound marred her side, her movements sluggish. And yet, she had chosen to leave the safety of the trees, to walk alongside a human child, in search of something only they could provide: kindness. What followed next would leave the entire village in disbelief. Deep in the forest, where the towering pines cast long shadows and the scent of damp earth filled the air, young Elias had set out to gather firewood before dusk. He was a boy of 10, nimble and adventurous, with an insatiable curiosity about the wilderness surrounding his village. But that evening, something unusual stopped him in his tracks. A low, pained growl echoed through the trees. Elias froze. He had spent his whole life hearing the calls of the wild: the yips of foxes, the hoots of owls, the rustle of deer through the underbrush. But this sound was different. It was deep and guttural, laced with pain. Slowly, he crept forward, brushing aside branches, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and fascination. And then he saw her. A massive mother bear lay at the base of an old oak tree, her body curled protectively around something Elias couldn't yet see. Her fur, thick and once magnificent, was matted with dirt and streaked with blood. She breathed heavily, each exhale shaky and uneven. Her front paw stretched protectively over a tiny, unmoving cub. Elias' breath caught in his throat. He knew the dangers of the forest, knew that a mother bear was the last creature anyone should approach. But something in her eyes stopped him from running. They weren't wild with rage or territorial aggression. They were desperate, pleading. She was asking for help. The cub, nestled beneath her, barely stirred. Its small body rose and fell in slow, uneven breaths. Elias could see the problem now. Its tiny leg was twisted unnaturally beneath it, likely injured in a fall. The mother must have been trying to carry it to safety, but in doing so, had pushed herself to the brink of exhaustion. Elias hesitated, his mind racing. He could turn back, run to the village for help, but the cub needed care now. He took a slow step forward. The mother's ears twitched, her heavy head lifting slightly. "I won't hurt him," Elias whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking to her or to himself. Carefully, he reached for his satchel, pulling out a small water flask. He uncapped it and, trembling, extended his hand. The mother bear sniffed the air, her nostrils flaring. Then, to his astonishment, she did not move as he inched closer. With delicate hands, he dribbled water onto the cub's lips. A tiny, weak whimper escaped its throat, but Elias could see a flicker of life return to its dark eyes. Encouraged, he carefully examined its injured leg. It wasn't broken, but twisted and swollen. He needed help. Summoning every ounce of courage, Elias made a decision that would change everything. "I'll get help," he whispered to the mother bear. She didn't resist as he stood, backing away slowly. She simply watched, her heavy body still, her breath steadying. Elias ran. By the time he reached the edge of the village, his lungs burned and his legs ached, but he barely noticed. He burst into the healer's home, breathless. "There's a bear. She's hurt. Her cub. Please, we have to help." The village healer, an older woman named Mara, studied the boy's face. There was no trace of fear in his eyes, only urgency. "Show me," she said simply. Armed with bandages, herbs, and a steady determination, Mara and a few brave villagers followed Elias back into the forest. They expected resistance. They expected a wild, unpredictable animal. But instead, they found something they never could have imagined. The mother bear stood weakly on her paws, her deep eyes watching as Elias returned. Not alone, but with people who could help. What happened next would be spoken of for generations. In the days that followed the rescue, the mother bear and her cub remained near the village, recovering in the safety of the surrounding woods. The healer, Mara, and a few brave villagers tended to them daily, bringing water, herbs, and food. But it was Elias who spent the most time by their side. Though the villagers had initially been wary of the bear, her behavior remained calm. She did not lash out or show signs of aggression. Instead, she watched with quiet patience as Elias and Mara carefully treated her wounds and wrapped the cub's injured leg. It was as if she understood they meant no harm. But what no one could have predicted was the bond that was about to form, one that would defy every instinct of nature itself. It started the morning after the rescue. Elias had just arrived at the clearing where the mother bear and her cub rested when a rustling in the underbrush caught his attention. A small, sleek shape emerged from the bushes, a dog, scruffy and lean, its fur a mix of brown and white. Elias recognized him instantly. It was Whistle, an old stray that roamed the village outskirts, never fully belonging to anyone, yet always lingering nearby. He had earned his name for his odd, high-pitched yip that echoed through the fields. Now, Whistle stood frozen at the sight before him. His ears perked, his tail stiff with uncertainty. The mother bear lifted her head. A low rumble vibrated in her chest, more curiosity than warning. The cub, still weak but growing stronger each day, stirred at her side, blinking up at the strange new visitor. For a long moment, no one moved. Elias held his breath. He had seen how fiercely the mother bear protected her cub. Would she see Whistle as a threat? But then, something astonishing happened. The little cub, still wobbly on its paws, took a hesitant step toward the dog. It sniffed the air, its small black nose twitching. Whistle took a step back, unsure, and then the cub let out a tiny, playful grunt. Whistle tilted his head. Slowly, his tail gave a tentative wag. It was the smallest movement, almost unnoticeable. But Elias felt the shift in the air, the first fragile thread of trust being woven between two creatures that had no reason to understand each other. Over the next few days, Whistle kept his distance, circling the clearing cautiously. But each time Elias visited the mother bear and her cub, Whistle followed, inching closer and closer. The cub, ever curious, became fascinated by the strange four-legged creature that was neither bear nor human. One afternoon, while Elias sat cross-legged near the mother bear, Whistle dared to step forward, his nose barely touching the cub's fur before darting back. The cub responded with an excited chuff, taking a playful swipe at Whistle's tail. Elias chuckled. The mother bear, watching from a resting spot, simply observed. No growl, no warning, just quiet acceptance. It was as if she had come to understand. This strange little creature meant no harm. And so, day by day, the bond grew. The cub would totter after Whistle, pouncing clumsily on his paws. Whistle, always patient, allowed the playful attacks, sometimes letting out an amused yip before trotting away, only to return moments later. At night, while the mother bear rested, Whistle curled up nearby, his ears twitching at every rustling leaf. He was no longer just a visitor. He was a companion, a guardian of sorts. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Elias watched as Whistle approached the mother bear herself. She lay stretched out, her large form relaxed, her cub nestled beside her. Whistle hesitated, then took a careful step forward. The mother bear turned her great head, her deep brown eyes meeting his. A long silence hung in the air. Then she exhaled softly. Not a growl, not a warning, just a breath. And with that, Whistle settled down beside them, resting his head on his paws. Elias felt something shift in his chest, something warm and full of wonder. This was more than survival, more than a chance encounter. Somehow, against all odds, these creatures had found each other. A wild bear, her cub, and a stray dog. An unlikely family formed not by instinct, but by something far greater. Something that could not be explained, only felt. And from that day forward, the villagers would tell the tale of the mother bear, the boy, and the dog who became the most unexpected of friends. The days turned into weeks, and what had begun as a hesitant truce between Whistle and the mother bear grew into something far deeper. Something neither the villagers nor Elias had ever seen before. The mother bear, once wary of the dog's presence, no longer tensed when Whistle approached. The cub, on the other hand, had become utterly fascinated by its canine companion, following Whistle's every movement with eager curiosity. It was as if the young bear had decided that Whistle was not just a friend, but a teacher, a creature to be studied and imitated. And so, the learning began. One crisp morning, Elias sat on a fallen log, watching as Whistle and the cub engaged in their usual playful antics. The cub had grown stronger, its injured leg healing under Mara's careful attention. Now it could clumsily chase after Whistle, attempting to mimic his swift, darting movements. Whistle, ever patient, would trot ahead, his tail wagging, then stop abruptly to let the cub catch up. Sometimes he would roll onto his back, paws in the air, inviting the cub to wrestle. Other times he would drop into a playful bow, his front legs stretched out, encouraging the little bear to do the same. Elias laughed as the cub attempted to mirror Whistle's movements. When Whistle crouched low to the ground in a playful stance, the cub tried to do the same, only to lose its balance and topple forward into a pile of leaves. Unfazed, they let out an excited chuff, scrambling back up to try again. The mother bear, resting nearby, watched all of this in silence. There was no trace of the fierce protectiveness she had displayed in the beginning. Instead, her great brown eyes held something softer, a quiet acceptance, perhaps even amusement. It wasn't just the cub that changed, it was the mother bear too. Before, she had been a creature of pure instinct, trusting only the wild. But now, she had begun to accept new things, things that once would have been unthinkable for an animal like her. One evening, as the sky faded to dusk, Elias arrived at the clearing with a bundle of food, berries, nuts, and a portion of fish the villagers had set aside. He placed it a safe distance from the bear and stepped back, just as he always did. But this time, something was different. Instead of waiting until he left to approach the food, the mother bear lifted her great head and looked at him. Then, slowly, she rose to her feet and, much to Elias' amazement, walked toward him. She stopped just a few feet away, her dark eyes steady, her breath slow and even. Elias could feel his own heart pounding, but he stayed still. Then, in an act that would later become legend, she lowered herself onto her belly and began to eat, right there, in his presence. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. From a short distance away, Whistle wagged his tail, as if pleased with this silent truce. The bond had deepened. As the days passed, the bears and Whistle became inseparable. If Whistle trotted off into the trees, the cub would waddle after him, sometimes letting out little whimpers when it fell too far behind. And the mother bear, once a solitary creature, bound by the rules of the wild, began to follow, too. One afternoon, Elias found them at the riverbank, watching Whistle as he eagerly splashed through the shallow water. The cub hesitated at the edge, unsure. Then, glancing at Whistle, it took a tentative step forward, dipping a paw into the cool stream. A delighted yip from Whistle seemed to encourage it further, and within moments, the cub was wading through the water, sending up tiny sprays as it clumsily pawed at the surface. The mother bear watched this, then, in an almost deliberate gesture, stepped into the river herself. It was small things like this, simple, quiet moments, that told Elias just how much had changed. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Elias sat outside his home, looking toward the edge of the forest. He had grown used to seeing the trio, Whistle, the cub, and the mother bear, roaming together, as though they had always belonged to the same world. But that night, something unexpected happened. As Elias stood to head inside, he heard a familiar rustling behind him. Turning, he saw Whistle trotting up the path, and following behind him, calm, steady, was the mother bear. Elias froze. She had never come this close before. She stopped a few feet away, her massive form silhouetted against the evening light. For a long moment, she simply looked at him, her deep brown eyes holding something Elias couldn't quite name. Then, she lowered her great head, just slightly, a silent acknowledgement, a gesture of trust. Elias swallowed hard, feeling a lump in his throat. Without thinking, he placed a hand on Whistle's head. The dog wagged his tail, as if this moment had been inevitable. The wild had found its place among them, and Elias knew, in that moment, that some bonds could never be broken. As the bond between Whistle, the mother bear, and her cub deepened, new challenges arose, ones that tested their trust, resilience, and the strength of their unlikely companionship. One evening, as Elias made his way through the woods to visit his unusual friends, he noticed something unsettling. The birds were silent. The air felt different, charged, tense. Whistle, who usually trotted ahead with his tail wagging, suddenly stopped, ears perked, nose twitching. Then, a low growl rumbled from the shadows. Elias turned just in time to see a pair of glowing yellow eyes staring back at him. A lone wolf had crept into the clearing, its thin frame tense with hunger. The mother bear, resting near her cub, immediately rose to her feet, her massive form towering. Whistle let out a sharp bark, stepping between Elias and the intruder. But before either Whistle or the bear could act, the cub, unaware of the danger, let out a curious chuff and took a few unsteady steps toward the wolf. Elias' heart pounded. He could see the calculation in the wolf's eyes. It had spotted an opportunity. But before the wolf could lunge, Whistle darted forward, barking furiously, his small body trembling but determined. At the same moment, the mother bear let out a powerful roar, one that echoed through the trees and sent birds scattering into the sky. The wolf hesitated. It was alone, and it had just been challenged by two creatures far more formidable than itself. Snarling, it slowly backed away, melting into the shadows of the trees. The danger had passed, but something had changed. Whistle, though much smaller and weaker than the mother bear, had stood his ground, protecting both Elias and the cub. And the mother bear had responded in kind, proving that their bond wasn't just built on curiosity or companionship. It was built on trust, on the kind of loyalty that only came from true friendship. The cub, though growing stronger by the day, still struggled with its injured leg. It had healed, but not without leaving a lasting hesitation in its movements. Certain things, climbing, running, jumping, still made it nervous. One afternoon, Elias watched as Whistle led the cub toward a fallen tree. The dog leapt onto it with ease, standing proudly at the top as if inviting the cub to do the same. The cub hesitated. It pawed at the bark, looking up at Whistle with uncertainty. The mother bear watched from a few feet away, her deep brown eyes calm but observant. Whistle, sensing the cub's fear, jumped down and tried again. He circled the tree, barked encouragingly, and leapt up once more, this time wagging his tail expectantly. The cub hesitated for a moment longer, then took a shaky step forward. It placed one paw on the tree, then another, claws gripping the rough bark. With a small huff of determination, it hoisted itself up. Whistle barked excitedly, circling the tree before jumping up beside the cub. Elias grinned. The mother bear let out a slow, approving exhale. The cub had learned something new, not just how to climb, but how to trust in itself. One evening, as a gentle rain fell over the forest, Elias sat beside Whistle, the mother bear, and her cub beneath the shelter of a large pine. The rain drummed softly on the leaves, filling the air with the scent of damp earth. The cub curled up beside its mother, eyes heavy with sleep. Whistle lay stretched out near them, his tail flicking lazily. Elias watched as the mother bear, once so cautious and guarded, lowered her massive head to rest beside Whistle. The dog blinked sleepily, then, without hesitation, nuzzled against her thick fur, sighing contentedly. In that moment, there were no differences between them, no barriers of species or instinct, just warmth, trust, and a bond stronger than anyone could have imagined. The day started like any other, with Elias making his way to the clearing, expecting to find the mother bear, her cub, and Whistle playing or resting together. But as he neared the familiar grove, something felt wrong. The air was thick with tension. The forest, usually filled with the gentle rustling of leaves and distant bird calls, was eerily silent. Then he heard it, a frantic yelp, sharp and pained. Elias broke into a run, his heart pounding. As he reached the clearing, his breath caught in his throat. A group of hunters, unfamiliar to the village, stood at the edge of the grove, their bows drawn. In front of them, Whistle barked wildly, standing between the hunters and the mother bear, who loomed protectively over her cub. The hunters must have stumbled upon them and, mistaking them for a threat, prepared to strike. But what shocked Elias most was Whistle's actions. The small dog, fearless as ever, refused to back down. His fur bristled, his teeth bared as he snapped at the hunter's boots, desperate to protect his family. The mother bear, though massive and powerful, did not attack. She stood her ground, tense but unmoving, as if waiting, trusting. One of the hunters lifted his bow, aiming directly at her. "No!" Elias shouted, sprinting forward. The sudden noise startled the hunters, making them hesitate just long enough for Elias to throw himself in front of Whistle and the bear. "They're not dangerous," he pleaded. "They're my friends." The hunters exchanged wary glances. A bear and a dog? Friends, one of them scoffed. But before they could act further, something remarkable happened. The mother bear, understanding the moment, did something unthinkable. She stepped back. Slowly, deliberately, she turned her head to nuzzle Whistle, then nudged her cub forward, as if to reassure them. Whistle, no longer barking, simply stood beside her, calm and steady. Elias turned to the hunters, his voice softer now. "She's not a threat. She trusts us. Please trust me." The hunters, seeing the impossible bond before them, the gentle way the bear stood with the dog, the way the cub pressed against Whistle for comfort, lowered their weapons. With a final glance at the strange, unbreakable family before them, they nodded and retreated into the woods. Elias exhaled shakily, his legs weak with relief. Then, without hesitation, Whistle turned and licked the bear's nose. She huffed softly, almost in amusement. The danger had passed, but in that moment, Elias knew their bond had been tested, and it had not broken. It had only grown stronger. And now, nothing could ever separate them. As the seasons changed and the days grew longer, the bond between Whistle, the mother bear, and her cub became something of legend in the village. Word of their unlikely friendship spread, whispered between elders by the fire and retold to wide-eyed children who could hardly believe such a thing was possible. Elias watched as the cub grew stronger, no longer stumbling as it once had. It was bolder now, more confident, chasing after Whistle with playful swipes and bounding through the meadows with newfound energy. The mother bear, once cautious and distant, had become something else entirely. Not just a guardian to her cub, but a companion to the small dog who had once been a stray with no home. Though their lives were different, they had found a way to exist together, bound not by instinct or survival alone, but by something greater: trust, understanding, and love. One cool autumn morning, Elias found them at the edge of the forest, standing still in the golden light. The mother bear lifted her great head, her deep brown eyes meeting his with something unspoken yet understood. It was time. The cub had grown strong. The forest called him home. Elias felt a lump form in his throat, but he knew this was how it had to be. Some bonds, no matter how deep, could not hold forever. But that did not make them any less real. Whistle, sensing the moment, let out a soft whimper. He stepped forward and nuzzled the cub one last time, then pressed his small head against the mother bear's thick fur. She let out a slow, quiet exhale, one that Elias swore held gratitude. Then, with one last glance back, the mother bear turned and disappeared into the trees, her cub following close behind. Whistle watched for a long moment before trotting back to Elias' side. Elias knelt, scratching Whistle behind the ears. "They'll be okay," he murmured, "and so will we." As the sun rose higher, painting the sky in soft shades of amber and gold, Elias and Whistle turned toward home, carrying with them a story that would never be forgotten. A story of trust, a story of love, a story of a bear, a boy, and a dog, who, for a time, were family.